Hello there and welcome to the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. My name is Craig Telfer and right this very second I am joined by my close associate Shaughan McGuigan.
Hello there.
And you know what happens when the Joe O'Meara and Danielle Lloyd of the Terrace get together? That is right, we are going to team up with Jade Greer to racially abuse a Bollywood star on national television and spark a diplomatic incident. And hopefully along the way we'll get the chance to talk about some lower league Scottish football.
That was a really dark episode of Celebrity Big Brother, wasn't it?
It was. I was actually watching the clips last night. I was going to say there's Jade Greer and Jackie Budden of the Terrace, but I thought, no, that's perhaps a bit too cruel given what subsequently happened to Jade. So settled on Joe O'Meara and Danielle Lloyd, and watching the clips on YouTube, yeah, it was really unsavoury. It was racist bullying. There's no other way to get around it. Really unpleasant.
Shilpa Shetty Poppadom, I believe is what was shouted.
Yes, aye, and stuff about like Danielle Lloyd said she cooked a chicken and said she couldn't be trusted to cook a chicken properly,
which doesn't sound very racist, but probably was.
Yeah, probably. You put it into the context. But anyway, listen, we're not going to get bogged down in the weeds of a diplomatic incident that happened in 2007. Listener, these intros are purely for comedic effect. That's all. You know what happens when we get together, though? I mean, we're going to get stuck in to some lower league football. It's my podcast. First podcast in about 4 weeks. And I am
listening to Yonks.
Yes,
absolute Yonks.
I know. I decided after we finished up A View from the Terrace, I decided to take a wee break from the podcasting and the podcasting and broadcasting. Not I've had many options. I had no choice but to take a break from the broadcasting because it's not as if people were banging down my door with offers. It's like A View from the Terrace is finished.
In fairness, Craig Telfer, you were on a lot of podcasts the other week. You were on an Alloa podcast and an Inverness podcast.
Oh yeah, I suppose actually fair enough. Yeah, maybe just a Terrace podcast then. That's the one. Just wanted a break from Fowler. That's as simple as that.
But you were also on a Terrace podcast, which was about what was it? Not Barclays Men. The
is that going up? Is that going live?
Oh, I don't know. But I just felt like you were on like you wanted a break. But we're actually on like three podcasts in a week.
I'm like Al Pacino in The Godfather Part 3. Just when I thought I was out, Inverness Caledonian Thistle fans send me a DM on Twitter and ask if I'd like to go on their Festive podcast, and they pull me back in. But Shaughan, as you know, you'll know better than anyone else how this podcast works. A 3-game format. It's patented. Don't try and steal it. It is our IP. We're going to be looking at one game from the Championship, another fixture from League One, and a final match from League Two. This is probably the final podcast of 2024. We'll do our best to have a laugh, but it's very unlikely. I mean, if we do achieve a modicum of laughter between now and this show's conclusion, I can assure you it is only by accident.
And probably forced.
Yeah, you, Shaughan. Yes, now, if you want to listen to the football, please just skip forward 10 minutes in this podcast because I'm about to ask Shaughan McGuigan how his Christmas was. So that's your warning to skip forward the next 10 minutes. Listener, you have been warned. 3, 2, 1. Shaughan, how are you? Did you have a nice Christmas?
I'm very well, thank you. My Christmas was actually reasonably busy. But it was maybe busier than more so. Maybe just because of how it fell. So, like Christmas Day, Boxing Day, very much kind of family orientated. But then one of my pals he has a birthday that falls between Christmas and New Year.
Okay.
So we generally go out. Thankfully, Friday decided to pick that. So I had a day out on Friday, and then I was out on Saturday with a load of boys for the Raith Rovers Livingston game. So it was a busy festive period. What about you?
Yeah, good. It's been really good. Particularly the week prior to Christmas was really good. There was a lot of things that happened socially, like a works night out, going out with friends on the Friday and then the Saturday, and this week, in that strange week, the sort of the nether region. The nether zone between Christmas and New Year. I've been living appallingly. I described to you off air, Shaughan. I said I'm eating like Ricky Hatton when he's not training, and the faces of him smiling chubbily behind a bucket hat. That's exactly what I look like just now. The people watching this on YouTube will agree with me. It's a time I've been to the gym, I think, twice in that period. So I'm well aware that when it comes to Monday, the 6th of January, that is back to back to business. I've got some stuff that arrived for a view from the terrace. A football top that came from Sweden. It's rather slight fitting, so I know that I need to get into that. So I've got two choices. I can either hit the gym hard or I can take up bulimia. So I might actually go for a combination of the two of them. Big muscles and very svelte at the same time.
There does really seem to be an element of concern about how you've been living your life, even though almost literally most of the kind of Western Hemisphere has been living the same kind of life. So I don't think you have to worry that much.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I make it sound like I've relapsed and I've started taking H again. I haven't. There's a Greggs in a Subway just down the other end of my street. I've just been in there quite a bit. So that's really it. That's really, I mean, it's not like I'm not hallucinating. There's no babies like crawling over my bedroom ceiling or anything like that. But it's just I have been eating a lot, and it's just you ever had that when you feel yourself gaining weight in real time?
Yes, absolutely. But just have a week or two of healthy dinners, and that's fine.
Yeah, and one final thing, you're into your movies, aren't you?
Yes, I've watched them.
Good. I don't know if you've watched this one, but I think it's widely regarded to be the worst film of 2024. I watched it on Saturday night, and I can
Madam
confirm.
Web.
Fucking hell, have you seen it?
No, but I did wonder if that's where you were going.
Oh my goodness, it is horrific. It's so bad. It's like I was watching it on Saturday, and there's bits where it's like Dakota Johnson clearly doesn't want to be there. She turns such an uninterested performance. It feels like it's an inconvenience for her to actually be on set. Sydney Sweeney, who I'm obviously a big fan of, terrible in it. The villain, guy who plays the villain, I think what had happened was the movie was going in one direction and they changed what they were doing halfway through or after it had finished filming. So all his lines are ADR, like recorded after the fact, and you see his lips are still, but he's talking, and all his lines are delivered when he's side on or his back's to camera. It's really bad. It's a really bad film, and not in a bad way like The Room or Biodome or something like that. It's a really bad film. A lot of money was spent on it, and there's a bit in it as well where she goes to a barbecue and she's got a Pepsi can in her hand for about 90 seconds, and that way when somebody threatens to open it, they never quite do. They get caught up in conversation and they gesture with their hands, and this very bright blue Pepsi can is up on screen. It's atrocious. There's a bit she goes to Peru. She just tells these girls that I'll be back in a week on my way to Peru. It's absurd. And listeners, if you have seen Madam Web, please get in touch with myself, because it'd be great to discuss it with someone. It really is a horrendous film.
It's popped up on Sky Movies recently, and I very much want to watch it, but I have not gotten around to it. But I did wonder if that's where you were going with the worst of 2024. Yeah,
you give it a go, so we can do a bonus Madam Web podcast where Shaughan and I go frame by frame through Madam Web. Listen, if you want it, we can make it happen. But Shaughan, rather than going through frame by frame of Madam Web, I think it's important that we go frame by frame through the Scottish lower leagues. Yes. And before we get on to the three games, I think there's only really one place we can possibly start, and that is with Raith Rovers, because there's big news that's come out of Kirkcaldy on the Sunday night. Barry Robson has been announced as their new manager. He's replaced Neil Collins, who inexplicably left Starks Park after some American mob paid a fee to sign him. Robson, of course, a former Scotland international, previously the manager of Aberdeen. He first took on the role on a caretaker basis at the end of the 22-23 season. Very hot, took the club into Europe, but struggled when given the job on a permanent basis. Left them at the end of January this year. Replaced by Neil Warnock. The less said about that, the better. And now he's pitched up at the Rovers. What are your thoughts?
I think my instant reaction was I think I was quite chuffed. However, I think some of that was down to who it wasn't rather than who it was. Like that, I was slightly concerned. There was a good few rumours that it might be Liam Fox. Thankfully, it isn't. And in terms of Barry Robson, I do think it's impossible to know how this one will go. And I know you can say that about every managerial appointment, but sometimes you get a vibe like, right, well, he doesn't have a good track record. He does have a good track record, or right, okay, so he's never been a manager before. This is his first time, but he's done this. So he's maybe been a leader. He's been a captain in previous positions. This one genuinely could be anything. I mean, you look at what he's done when he was the caretaker, most things went right. you look at what happened when he became permanent manager at Aberdeen, most things went wrong. And I mean, to lead the club from 7th to 3rd, great. I mean, that is a genuinely good achievement. But to go from finishing 3rd to then getting sacked when Aberdeen are 8th, I think it was like 6 wins in 21. I mean, that's just very, very poor. So I'm concerned about that. And in terms of how Aberdeen fans said his style of play was, quite negative, very, very direct. I suppose what I am kind of clinging to, I suppose, in terms of that second part, post-summer, post-permanent contract, is he wouldn't be the first manager or first team to struggle when they have to balance that playing on a Thursday, then playing on a Sunday. So
you see it happen. I mean, it's not like look at Hearts, for instance, this season.
Absolutely, so it happens. So I literally have no idea how it will go. When I saw the list, I must admit I did think it was slim pickings in there. I thought that Barry Robson's name was one that was maybe one of the less worrying names. So yes, I think I'm absolutely fine with it. I do find that unusual in terms of Raith fans that were desperate to have him appointed, because I wasn't entirely sure what he'd done up until this point, and I think it's unusual in terms of Raith fans that are, oh, that's a great appointment, because again, not entirely sure what he's done. However, time will tell. Hopefully he's fine, but ginger.
What about the picture that Raith Rovers used to accompany his signing? Now, there was a comment that said he looked like a branch manager at a local RBS, which is very funny because that's exactly what he looked like. But then it transpired that Raith Rovers have taken a JPEG from Aberdeen, cropped out the Aberdeen branding, and changed the colour of his tie from red to blue.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not entirely sure why they've decided to do that rather than just wait until he was available for a photo shoot and put on a blue tie. But regardless, I don't know why they've done that.
Yeah, and they could have put a better knot in his tie. It looked like he was just come off the set of Grange Hill.
Had a sausage thrown at him.
Grange Hill was good. Certainly when they moved to more adult-orientated teams. I remember a young kid took LSD and climbed to the top of the school building. Thought it was a transfer tattoo, but alas, it certainly was not.
I must admit, I did enjoy Grange Hill as well. I'm not entirely sure it, because that was at the same age that I was going through watching Grange Hill. I kind of moved up through the years in terms of, it's similar. So I'm now in 4th year. Now we're seeing 4th year storylines. Not entirely sure they're kind of married up, but regardless, it was good drama.
Yes, I think that when Grange Hill ultimately finished up, I think it had gone down a route where I think it was made for like 13 and 14-year-olds. So it dealt with like mature themes relative to age. But then by the finish up, it was aimed at like 10-year-olds. So it's a very cute idea of high school. Like you'd look after rabbits and stuff like that. I can assure you it was not like that.
I mean, I did have a pet rabbit.
No, there you go then. Maybe it was. Shaughan, we've got the nonsense out of the way. We'll start with our first game proper, and we're going to the Championship, obviously, and we'll look at the undisputed game of the weekend. It was broadcast live on BBC Scotland on Friday night. Dunfermline Athletic 3, Falkirk 3. The Bairns led this match in 3 occasions through Callum Morrison, Aidan Nisbet and Liam Henderson, but the Pars equalised 3 times through penalties from Chris Kane and Matty Todd, and Kyle Benedictus' 92nd minute header. A lot to like about this game, a lot to talk about for that happened both on the pitch and in the stands. But Dunfermline are still in 9th place. They've inched a wee bit further away from Airdronians at the bottom, while Falkirk, they've maintained their lead at the top of the table. They hold a 6-point advantage. Everything seemed to go their way this weekend, although they dropped points themselves. So did Livingston and Ayr United, so no change at the top. Now, we'll talk, as we mentioned there, we'll talk a wee bit about what happened in the match. We'll come on to that in a couple of minutes, but I think it's important perhaps to talk about the behaviour of some of the supporters, and I've got to say it's most noticeably from the away fans that attended. There was a minute's applause at the beginning of the game for Alex Edwards, a former Dunfermline player, played for them in the 60s and 70s, passed away at the beginning of December. Things were thrown onto the pitch, seats were damaged, and there was occasions where supporters spilled onto the pitch while celebrating the goals, most noticeably Liam Henderson's goal in the 85th minute. And what makes this fixture so good is the fact that both sets of fans just don't like each other. I think that's good. That mutual dislike makes games of football, it gives them an extra edge. But there was a nastiness to this one, and it felt like, even though not there, but even watching it on the television, you could just feel there was just a wee bit of unpleasantness here.
Yeah, I don't know how to describe it in terms of, there is very much something to embrace about this whole kind of casual or ultra scenario, I suppose. And if they hadn't been there on Friday night, then the atmosphere wouldn't have been as good. However, by the same token, everything else they're bringing round about that is really, really, really poor. I'm starting to get a wee bit fed up with it. So in terms of throwing seats about, I don't just mean Falkirk. Like there's a number of clubs that have got issues with this kind of casual culture. But in terms of throwing seats, kind of not respecting the minute's applause, throwing whatever it was, fireworks or pyro on the park, and invading the park, which is probably like the least egregious thing that they did, for example. But also, I don't know if you've seen the videos of fans running about Dunfermline before the game.
No, I didn't see it.
I think it was before the game. Might be after the game. I presumed it was before the game. But just in terms of kind of fighting and throwing fireworks about, but just you're in a kind of housing estate. And it's like that.
Yeah.
It's really, it's really pathetic, and it's really, it's a pain in the arse.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned something on Pie and Bovril about Alloa fans throwing things about.
I was going to come on and talk about that.
I was at Starts Park on Saturday. They had the kind of young team were at the front of the stand on Saturday. They kind of banged the drum. They sung songs. It was actually pretty good. But then when I went they disappeared in the second half. Weren't there. Now I don't know why. The suggestions that they'd arranged to meet Livingston fans to do whatever, whether it was a fight or exchange handshakes, I have no idea. But when I went to the toilet at the end of the game, the toilets had been smashed up. So the doors had been kicked off, the cubicles had all been spray painted. Now maybe it wasn't the young team, maybe it hadn't been the young ultras. I have no idea. I would imagine it was though. Mm-hmm. And it just feels like every week, whether it's Championship, League One or whatever, there is something that is something we'd rather not have. Seems to be happening in terms of Scottish football lower leagues, and it's really very, very disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, from our experiences from the weekend's game between Alloa Athletic and Stenhousemuir, we were in amongst the ultras, a bunch of younger boys that started following Stenhousemuir, and I've got to say, it was class. It was class because I'm nearly 40, right? So I've got to caveat it by saying, but there's just a bunch of young boys that are just singing, and they've got the drum and they're bouncing about, and they really are getting behind the team. And when we would start singing, they would join in, and vice versa. So it created a good atmosphere. But that drew the attention, obviously, of the wee fannies that support Alloa. And I think we've spoken about this in the past, that Alloa have got a bit of an issue with the sort of younger Neddy element that have attached themselves to the club. And on 2 occasions, the match was stopped because pyro was thrown onto the pitch from the home support, one of which I could see, which was thrown, and it marked the pitch as well. Obviously, the Rex is a synthetic surface. And there was 2 occasions where flares were thrown into the away support. Now, there's a wee gap. They were coming from outside the ground into the ground. So I've got a degree of people were shouting at the stewards, do your job. It's like, well, if it's coming from outside the ground, that's perhaps outside their area of jurisdiction. Uh-huh. But it goes from, you create a great atmosphere for the team. And this is both sets of fans, for the home fans, the young team and the away team. But then when you bring in the element of pyrotechnics, you run the risk. I think pyrotechnics are class. I think they are really cool, and I do think they add something to the game. But it's just that, what do you do with them afterwards? And if they get chucked on the pitch, you cause damage. If Alloa's pitch is damaged and it's our flares that have gone into it, we're the club that's going to get billed for it. You know? So it's the same with, like for instance, like Dumbarton, when they visited Oakview a couple of weeks ago, the toilets in the terracing end were smashed up by Dumbarton fans. And this is a club who, well, they're in administration. They don't have a lot of money, and it's an expense that they could do without. And it's just a shame that real support for the club can sometimes it spills into something just like nastier.
The only thing I've thought about this in terms of how do you stop it, unless you have an increased police presence, for example. Because I don't think statements stop it at all. But I did think it was interesting in terms of John McGuigan. And not that I'm blaming John McGuigan for anything. I'm not saying that he was aware of what was going on outside the game. I maybe wasn't aware of like seats being thrown on and things like that. But the end of his interview with Falkirk TV was, well, John, there was 2,800 fans here today. You know, do you have any message? He was like, "Oh, they were great today, absolutely brilliant." Really
it was the only time in the interview because he seemed quite dour in that interview. Yeah. That was the only time he actually seemed to pick up when he was praising the away support.
And actually, I just think at that point, because he would have known at that point that they had sung during the minute silence, so there might be something they could say there in terms of Falkirk fans' behaviour. So whether it was the chanting during the minute silence, whether it was running a park, whether it was thrown on seats. And maybe he didn't have to do it then. I'm not saying he should. But I just think whoever is, whether it was Rovers fans or Falkirk fans or Dunfermline fans or Stenny fans, somebody needs to come out from the club. And I think ideally a manager or a player and just say, this is unacceptable. And maybe somebody will take the message at that point. And I'm not even entirely sure that they would take that message, but it's better than just, here's a statement and we're going to put it on Facebook or Twitter or whatever.
Mm-hmm. I saw that been having read the match thread on Pie and Bovril. I think that there's a consensus that was perhaps the nastiest it's been for a while between the clubs, and it can perhaps be put down to the factors like it's at the week between Christmas and New Year where a lot of people are off their work. There are a lot of hangers-oners that are going to the game. Some people that hadn't necessarily been to a Falkirk game previously that were at the match. So I mean, that's not to make excuses, but that's perhaps to explain why there's that element. But I think what was good to see was that certainly the posts from both sets of supporters were roundly condemning the actions, basically echoing what you and I are saying, that yes, they do bring a lot to the football and it's great. And I think there was just not necessarily about Falkirk, but I think there was Gregor Buchanan had was something where I was told he had spoken to someone at the club and said that he wishes home games could be like the way it was on Saturday, where everyone's singing and everyone's really up for it, because it does spur the players on. I'm sure it does, and it does help. However, when you start, like if the Dunfermline goal, if Ollie Uemi's getting like a coffee apparently chucked at him, that's shite.
Yeah, of course it is. And they also had what would you say, an early pitch invasion, which Falkirk fans should really know. Whatever you do not have an early pitch invasion, because that's ultimately why you ended up in League One.
Maybe that's why there was all that extra time added on them, because it took so long to clear the pitch. So that's why Kyle Benedictus had all the time in the world to leap at the back post and get the point. Certainly not as egregious as that one down in Queen of the South all those years ago. That's still the gold standard in terms of ruinous pitch invasions. But nevertheless, now that's the moral hand-wringing out the way, Shaughan. I know that you don't come to listen to the Lower League Terrace podcast to hear Shaughan and I talk about serious issues. You come to hear us talk about Kelty Hearts and Badil syndrome. So we're not going to talk specifically about either of those things today, but you know what I mean. Shaughan, what were your thoughts on this match? It was a big, daft, chaotic game of football.
I must admit, I did not see what I suppose did occur after the first 20 minutes. I thought it started reasonably slow. I must admit, I did think that there would be a reaction from Dunfermline because of James McPake's dismissal. And what I thought was they would maybe raise their game. There would be an injection of energy, and it would last an hour or so. And ultimately, Falkirk being a better team would win the day. I thought Falkirk would win about 3-1. And I kind of thought that was ultimately what was about to happen. And as much as Falkirk went 3-2 up with a couple of minutes to go, and I was like, well, maybe it's always felt like this across the 90 minutes or so far, that they were the team that was the most likely to win. See, when Kyle Benedictus scored the equaliser, I was like, actually, you know something? That's absolutely fair enough. And they probably did deserve something in the game. But more to do with more to do with work rate and energy rather than necessarily good quality.
Yeah, because I thought Dunfermline were pretty crap, to be honest. I thought that under normal circumstances, Falkirk would have beaten them like quite handily. It's just that it was. I mean, how often do you concede 2 penalties in a game? And there was I know there's a bit of a dispute. I thought they were both penalties. I thought they were pretty. The referee got them spot on, but it's very rare that you concede 2 penalties in a match. Just unfortunately for Falkirk, that's what happened. And then there's a degree of misfortune about that. You don't leave the most clear and obvious offensive threat at a set piece to be marked by an 11-year-old boy. You know, what on earth that Kyle Benedictus was doing. He must have thought like Christmas had come once again. The fact that it was Finn Yates at the back post trying to stop him. But I thought that I was thinking the chances that they had. Other than there was a bit in the second half where Dapo Mabudi came onto his right foot and had a shot straight at Nicky Hogarth, real easy for him to save. Outside of that, I don't think they created anything outside the set pieces. The only good chance they had, the one where Chris Kane had a shot on Hogarth in the first half, and Hogarth had to dive down quite close to save it. That was the second phase of a free kick. Outside that, I don't remember Dunfermline created much, and I thought Falkirk were miles the better side. I've got to say though, what I would say is that while I wasn't too impressed with Dunfermline's overall quality, I think that, as you say there, the work rate, the organisation, that you've got to be impressed by that, because it looked like a hard shift against a team who are really, really good and capable of playing some quick, eye-catching football.
Yeah, so I totally agree with what you're saying. However, bear in mind, like Falkirk's first goal was a throw-in, their second goal was a free kick, and their third goal was a corner. So all 6 goals essentially came from set pieces. It's not as if Falkirk were creating endless chances from open play, and I do think that either Falkirk weren't at their best and so weren't creating as many chances as they normally would.
Okay, or Dunfermline limited.
Or Dunfermline restricted it.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. I suppose that when you are in Dunfermline's position, then it's when John McLaughlin, who after in his post-match interview, he was really full of praise to the players, said they executed his game plan perfectly. So maybe there is some credence to that. It was just shut them down. Don't cede any space out wide. I mean, for instance, like Dylan Tate, although he obviously set up Aidan Nisbet's goal, wasn't as heavily involved as you'd expect from. Neither was Brad Spencer. And I think that's, I mean, if Dunfermline are going to take the playbook out from Livingston, if you can get on the two of them and stop them from playing, you can really inhibit Falkirk. So I think that's something that Dunfermline should be proud of. I suppose maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you've convinced me. I've completely talked myself out. Maybe Dunfermline did actually do pretty well in this game. I just thought that it was like most of the time it was like Falkirk camped out in Dunfermline's half.
No, I do agree with you, but maybe not quite slightly as harshly as you suggested. But I do think that in terms of I watched Dunfermline's game against Morton, Dunfermline's game against Raith, didn't create anything. And you look at what they did against Falkirk, so they probably got more players in the final third. Did that work? I'm not entirely sure. I mean, they got 2 penalties and they scored from they scored from another set piece. Don't really know if that worked. I'm also not entirely sure that they defended that well, like in terms of the goals that Falkirk scored. Certainly the first goal, and although the second goal was quick and clever, they maybe could have defended that a lot better. But regardless, there's something about just working a wee bit harder, and I'm not entirely sure they would have got that result on Friday night if James McPake had been in charge.
I'd probably agree with you on that. Sometimes I think that the club perhaps made the decision at the right time to get the point from that match. I think there's a degree of freshness there that McLaughlin, maybe it's just McLaughlin just doing something different. I mean, I'll be honest, I'd never heard of John McLaughlin before.
Me neither.
I did see though, thanks to where I've got it written down here. Yeah, it's the Aki's FC Twitter account. It's the one that is the news stats info.
Oh,
he played for Hamilton in the 1980s.
Did he have that hairstyle? Because see, every time I saw him on Friday, I was like, I bet you've had the haircuts for about 40 years. And it's just the tint that's changed.
Yes, I think he got that when he was 13, and he's never needed to change it. He's never wanted to change it. But yeah, I thought that in Kyle Benedict's post-match interview, I think the very first thing he said, it shows that the team's sticking together. So maybe that by removing McPake, it's just a different voice, a different kind of energy in the dressing room, backed by a very noisy home support. So we've spoken about like how like the Falkirk fans, who like the majority of them like just really, really got behind the team, as they've been doing for the past 18 months or so. But Dunfermline had good support as well, and given the fact that for the past 18 months they haven't had much to cheer, that they really did help egg the team on, and were able to get that extra 2 or 3% out of them. Because when Liam Henderson scored, I think there have been few people that would have thought Dunfermline would have taken anything from that game.
Yeah, I was impressed by them. And as soon as it went 3-2, as I said, I thought, well, that'll be that. And I think it was me. I've probably been away up the road. I was like, well, that'll be that. I've had a good night. I've enjoyed myself. I'm away. But fair play. They dug in. Equalised again for the third time in the game. And they probably, I don't know if you necessarily agree, but I thought they just about deserved it.
I'm not sure. I think for Falkirk it would be. I would see that as 2 points dropped if I was associated with Falkirk. However, ultimately it didn't matter, because you'd have looked at. I remember when seeing Benedictus scoring and thinking, well, that's interesting, because they've taken a point from that. Livingston are playing Raith Rovers. They're in a bit of a funny state at the moment since Neil Collins has gone. I mean, it's not been a great season for Raith Rovers. You'd have looked at it as a winnable fixture. And with Ayr United taking on Greenock Morton, you'd have definitely looked at that as a winnable fixture. Yeah. But then there's Livingston getting turned over, Ayr United failing to beat Morton. So there's no change. So although ultimately it's not 2 points dropped, that hasn't changed. Just another game closer towards the end of the season. So no real harm done. I've got to say though, other than Henderson's goal, which I think was an absolute nightmare for Ollie Oyemi, I didn't think he had a particularly good game actually a couple of times. So if you're getting hot beverages chucked at you, you're not necessarily going to be firing on all cylinders. But I did think that the Morrison's goal and Nesbitt's goal were both very well taken goals. But there's different things to like about the goals.
Yeah, very much so. So in terms of the first one, did you think that McKeever meant to touch it off to him? Or do you think he just... No, do you think he meant it?
I do. I think that those players have got that chemistry between them, and I do think that it's when you see it. We've seen it happen before. We've seen it happen last season. We've seen it happen this season. That these Falkirk players, they can like do things that you see in the PlayStation, and I think that was one such moment. And there's a stunning finish from Morrison as well. I mean, it's not an exaggeration to say, but if the net wasn't still there, the ball would still be going.
I wasn't 100% certain in terms of the layoff, but the finish was absolutely tremendous. And in terms of the quick free kick, I actually thought that Colin Stephen might have brought it back.
Yeah,
just because I find him quite a pernickety referee, and it feels like the kind of thing that he would maybe bring back. Not necessarily because it was quick, but because it was
in the wrong place.
Maybe 5 yards to the left of where it should have been, but ultimately, who cares? But no, at the time I thought it might be an offside. But as looking at it back, great quick thinking for Dylan Tate, brilliant finish from Aidan Nesbitt. I fair play to them.
Mm-hmm. And what about the two Dunfermline penalties? Is there any disputing that they were penalties? The first one's Chris Kane just touches the ball slightly before Aidan Nesbitt, and Nesbitt kicks his foot.
I don't think so. I do think it is a penalty. I think Kane gets there a wee bit earlier than Nesbitt, and it probably soft, but I do think it's a penalty. What
about the second one?
It just is a penalty. I mean, he's in the box. His hands above his head. I know there might be some dubiety about it, but no, I thought it was a penalty as well.
I mean, I suppose Falkirk, it's business as usual for Falkirk. They just keep on. They keep on going. As we mentioned, it's another game ticked off, or another march towards that. What is the start of the season? I don't think many people would have seen winning the championship title. They do seem the obvious favourites at the moment. What with Dunfermline though, because they're, as you mentioned, in quite an interesting place. James McPake going, John McLaughlin played for Hamilton Accies in the 1980s. He's taken charge of the team for the time being. But I think betting has been suspended on Michael Tidser taking the reins as manager. He's currently at Kelty Hearts. What would be your thoughts if Tidser, he's not been confirmed yet, it could happen during this recording, but what would be your thoughts if Tidser was to take charge?
So I let him cut his jib, that's what I would say. Yeah. I think we've always kind of spoke pretty highly of him. And maybe it is a bit of a risk when you're in a relegation battle to a degree. If I was a Dunfermline fan, I would still be pretty happy with it. I think he comes across well. I think he has had a kind of successful time in terms of results when he's been at Kelty. I think he plays a kind of a style of football that's pleasing on the eye. Mm-hmm. I suppose in terms of a negative, it's a bit of a risk in terms of somebody coming from a part-time football to a full-time football club that is in a relegation struggle. So that is, I suppose that's the only negative. But I suspect that I would have been quite happy with him at Raith. So I'm certainly going to dismiss him if he goes to Dunfermline. Yeah,
same with yourself. I think every time we've spoken about Kelty Hearts in this podcast and watched his post-match interviews, he always comes across well. I like the way he talks about the game. I like the way he sees it. I always look forward to if the two times this season where my team, in fact, to say the two times we played them twice, and he didn't give the post-match interview. I was an assistant when Stenny beat them 2-1. But other games we've been in, like, I think he's interesting. He's fair in the way he talks, and he's quite direct in the way he talks, and I do think the Dunfermline players would respond to that well. And you say that it's a bit of a risk, but then Kelty appointing him was a bit of a risk. You know, that was when they were going through that transitional period when they were moving away from being the big spending team, and he was having to make do with just becoming a normal part-time club. And here they are. He's got them from a team who we would have thought would have been like trying to stay in the division to a team that looks like a good shout to finish in the top four. So it just feels like the next step is just that whether or not his ideas can be implemented at this stage of the season. Because I think that's another point to factor, is that one of the things that he has done very well is with loan signings. He's been very good at taking players in on loan and making them better. Like Scott Williamson is one. There's a name scheme. I think it's Connor Allen, central midfielder who looks like a smashing wee prospect. That's what he's been good at doing. And there's like a difference between being a good part-time manager and being a good full-time manager, but you don't know unless you get the chance to explore it. But I wonder if he'll play. Do you think he'd pull on the boots?
Wouldn't it be the worst Dunfermline midfielder if he was to join him?
I will not stand for the Joe Chalmers slander on this. That's who you're referring to, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
Also, there's one thing I think I might say about Falkirk. Luke Graham will be leaving the club. He's returned to Dundee. I think Dundee are going through a bit of a crisis at centre-back, and it makes sense. Luke Graham's had a really good time at Falkirk, and I think he'll leave the club a better player than he was when he first joined. But that is a bit of a blow, because feels like Tom Lang still feels like he's a wee bit away. Donaldson is pretty much second choice now behind Graham and Henderson. So I suppose that there'll be slight division, but Donaldson's a pretty capable deputy and able to step up. And obviously the good partnership with Henderson last season.
Yeah, Donaldson's very good. I'll be interested to see how long Lang, like if Lang is still a wee bit away, as you'll try and bring somebody else in. I wouldn't be surprised if they do. Whether it'll be as good as Graham has been, I have my doubts. I think he's been excellent for them. Yeah.
Up next, Airdrie versus Falkirk. How do you see that one going?
I think Falkirk might win.
Me too. You got read my notes here, Shaughan. And Partick Thistle versus Dunfermline. That's Thistle, the most informed side. Quietly, actually, the most informed side in the division at the moment over the last 5 or 6 games.
Partick Thistle just seem to win 1-0, 2-1, whatever every week. So yes, I'll go for Partick Thistle.
Fair play. And just before we move on into League One, we have to say, pass on our best wishes to the Hamilton Accies midfielder Ben Williamson, involved in a car accident over the weekend. And it sounds pretty serious, and hope that he makes a speedy recovery and he's back in the pitch soon. Now, we will drop into League One, and we were teasing it. We're going to go to Recreation Park, where Alloa Athletic were defeated 3-1 by Stenhousemuir. You know how this podcast works. It's Raith Rovers, Stenhousemuir and 28 other cunts. Aaron Steele and Mikey Anderson gave the Warriors a 2-goal lead, and although Connor Salmon pulled one back for the Wasps, a late strike from Corey O'Donnell won the points for Stenny. Alloa are just outside the playoff place in 5th, but Stenny, they are in 2nd. So it's been a remarkable 2024 for the Warriors. Shaughan, I was at this match. Feel free to ask me any questions about it.
Would it be fair to say that this was a kind of statement win? Because I've watched the highlights and I thought Stenny looked broadly very comfortable.
Yeah, it did feel like a bit of a statement win because Stenny have played Alloa twice this season. They've lost both encounters 1-0, and I think most right-minded people who were at the games would say that they were unfortunate in both instances. They should have drawn at the Rex at the start of the season, and they should have beaten them at Oakville View, the match that was broadcast on BBC Alba. And this match felt like it was from, other than maybe about a 10-minute spell midway through the second half where Connor Salmon got the goal back, and it looked a wee bit nervy for them. Outside of that, Stenny were the better side, and it did feel to go away to a team who have been a bit of a bogey side for you, turn them over quite comfortably to, well, I mean, I'm going to use the word title challenge. I don't know what else to describe this as. To keep it going, very, very impressive. And that was off the back of 2 poor performances as well against Queen of the South and Cali Thistle. So I think Gary Naismith should be really happy, and so should his players. I think they played really well.
Was there any kind of reason as to why you played so poorly in the 2 games previous and then kind of were so impressive against Alloa?
Well, I missed the Queen of the South match. I wasn't able to make it down to Palmerston at a prior engagement, but I was at the game against Inverness Caledonian Thistle, and I think it's fair to say the conditions were absolutely atrocious, particularly in the second half, and Cali Thistle did have the win behind them. But even so, it just felt like a matter of time before they were going to score. I think I was kind of hoping that Stenny would hold on and get the point, but it just didn't happen. So when the goal went in, I was just like, all right, well, that happened. That's shite. I think that what had happened in that match was that the midfield was quite easy for Cali Thistle to run through. And so what Naismith did was I think it was a response to the game against Inverness, and as a response to the fact that Alloa Athletic don't really have a lot going on in the wide positions, was to go for a back 5, 2 of Mikey Anderson and Nat Wedderburn in front of the defence, Blair Alston and Matty Yates playing as like dual number 10s, and then Corey O'Donnell up front on his own. So basically you're packing the midfield. You effectively got like 4 central midfielders, and then you've got, because Alloa just aren't very good in the wide positions, they're going to have to come in the way, and you've got better midfielders than them. So I think that was the dual purpose, and it certainly worked for by and large.
You're talking about Stenny out wide. However, once again, as it has been certainly last season and this season to a degree, their ability to eke out chances and score goals from corner kicks is quite outrageous.
Yeah, it's there was, particularly last season, anytime Stenny got a corner, I think, well, we're going to score. Honestly, it felt like it's not an exaggeration to say, but I think there was times where it felt like a bit of a penalty. Do you remember when Rory Delat was playing for Stoke, and anytime they got a throw in, the whole crowd were like, oh, here we go. That was like Stenny getting corners last season. You had Adam Brown or Matty Yates to swing them in. You've got just a plethora of big defenders to aim at, and Stenny have got that. I think Stenny might be one of the tallest sides in the division. You've got the back 3 were all about like 6'2", 6'3". You've got Nat Wedderburn, you've got Corey O'Donnell, all big laddies that can get the head in the ball. So you've got a number of options to put the ball into, and it was Aaron Steele that opened the scoring. I think that's his second goal for the club with a really good header.
That was a class goal. And then the second goal to put yourselves 2-0 up, Mikey Anderson kind of pounced, I suppose, on poor defending, but his finish, I mean, from distance was excellent, I thought.
Mikey Anderson's got 3 goals for the season, and all 3 of them have come from him annoying someone into giving the ball away and then scoring. He did it against Cove Rangers, he's done it against Alloa Athletic, he did it here. PJ Morrison gives the ball to Mikko Virtanen, and Virtanen, he's been closed down but just takes a poor touch. Anderson gets the ball out of his feet and just sends it with his bad foot as well, sailing over Morrison and into the net. It's a really, really well taken goal, and I think that sums up how Anderson's qualities, just that he must be an absolute pain in the arse to play against. I think I've said it before, his nickname's the Spider, because he almost feels like he's got 8 legs.
And despite Stenny being I thought, judging by the highlights, far and away the better team. It felt like Alloa had a wee spell, certainly in the second half. And Connor Salmon's kind of looping header was a Luke Rankin delivery, maybe.
I think
that was a good goal.
That was given offside.
Oh, sorry, it was. So who grabbed the Alloa's goal?
It was Salmon. It was Luke Donnelly slipped him through and a good finish from an angle.
So it was. Yeah, and was that unfair at that point, or were you slightly concerned that Alloa were coming back?
He did what Andy Graham did at half time. He moved Stephen O'Donnell he took off Kane Thompson, who had been struggling a wee bit. I think he was struggling with like Matty Yates and Ross Meakin were teaming up quite well. Meakin had a really, really good game. I think that's actually his best performance of the season. Wing back was a position that I'm not sure how familiar isn't it, but he played it very well. And Kane Thompson had been struggling against him. They put on Stefan Skugel into the middle of the park and moved Stephen O'Donnell out to fullback. And Skugel began to get a grip of the game. And Skugel, straight away, every time he got on the ball, it was pass and move. And just Alloa's tempo just increased dramatically after his introduction. And he was getting the ball into good spaces. And because he was doing that, Stenny had to go in the back foot a wee bit and allowed Donnelly to find a wee bit of space. I always think that Donnelly's better in theory than he is in practice, because I reckon he can go missing for like 88 minutes of the match, but then he can slip a through ball into Salmon for a goal like that. But it was definitely the introduction of Stefan Skugel and then Connor Salmon later on. I know there's some Alloa fans that don't particularly rate Connor Salmon. Every time I see him, he gives me the fear, because I think got 2 for the season against the Warriors. Every time I play him, he's just a nuisance. It's funny. I think I was saying this in that Wine and Shuffle podcast I did. I reckon if you went and asked every set of supporters from every club who the best team is that you've come against, who are the best players you've seen, you would get different answers from every set of supporters. You know, like you look at the Premiership or the Championship, Celtic, Falkirk, and that's reflected in the league table. It's not reflected in League One. Because I still think Queen of the South are the best team that I've seen this season, and they're demonstrably not. So it's funny that that's like seeing Connor Salmon, seeing Stephen Skugel. I think these guys are class, but Alloa fans might have a different opinion to me because they're the ones that I've got to see them every week. And
I suppose the scoring was completed by Corey O'Donnell.
Yeah,
Matt Yates that teed him up.
Matt Yates, that's his second assist of the game. I think he is by far and away the leading assist provider in that division. He's really come on to a game. He'd been dropped by Gary Naismith for a couple of weeks, but since then he's really stepped up and been such an important player for us. And just the pass through to O'Donnell, I mean, it's really quite funny watching the highlights, because Alloa pushing everything forward, trying to get an equaliser. Stenny catches them goal. I think it's Blair Alston blocks out a pass, releases Yates, and you can see Morgan Neal running back into the Alloa line.
Why does he do this?
He actually runs back, does it? And then he's running so fast, he actually plays O'Donnell on side. So he's sprinting from his own half to play the Stenny striker on side. And it's a nice wee Yates times his through ball very well, and it's a good finish from an angle, because I was standing in line with it and thinking it's one of those shots that you think he's going to smash it off the goalkeeper. So to see him just precisely place it in between that little gap between the inside post and the net, just a really well taken finish. And he had a good game, Corey O'Donnell. Kind of a weird player, signing from Broomhill, which is, I mean, Stenny don't necessarily have a good record of signing players from Broomhill, but he's a big, strong boy. He's really fast. He's deceptively fast. And his hold-up play, he's a little unrefined. He could perhaps pop the ball off a little bit quicker than he does, and he can perhaps put himself about a bit more. When you're up against like Dave Mackay and Morgan Neal, these guys want to head the ball. Give them a fight. Bang into them. Barge into them. Give them something to think about. He could do that a wee bit more often. But he is unorthodox, and I quite like him, and I think the fans have taken to him. And the best thing about that goal, and this wasn't missed in the highlights, you can just see it but before the camera cuts away, is Matty Yates runs straight over to the supporters. When he releases that ball and it hits the back of it, he runs straight over to the supporters. So you've got the players are not celebrating with Corey O'Donnell. They've come over and celebrating with the fans. Matt Weatherman came over. I had his face in my hands, like celebrating with him. And there's Ross Meakin, Greggy Buchanan, Matty Yates, brilliant. And it's that connection that is spoken about it so many times, this group of players, that connection between the squad, the team, the management, the supporters, it is untouchable. And it's been such a good year for them. And that's a brilliant way to cap the year.
So you're talking about fans, you're talking about their reaction to winning, you're talking about the entire year. How relieved were you that Gary Naismith wasn't? Because there was rumours that he was in for the Raith Rovers position.
Delighted because I can understand the reasons why a full-time club would be put off him. And I can understand why if he was linked with Raith Rovers, some of your fans, I saw that discussions on Pine Bovril, some of the fans would be like, he's not really for me. I think that he probably deserves a chance to go to another club. I mean, he's done tremendous at Stenhousemuir over the past, since he's been at the club, really. That's come up for 2 years now. And you could maybe say that right at the very beginning, he perhaps could have done better to get the club into the top four. Since that, however, it's just been almost like a diagonal upward. It's been an upward curve of success that he's had. And so if you're looking for an experienced manager to get you out of a situation that the Rovers have done Dunfermline signing, I think Naismith would be a good guy to go for. That hasn't been the case. I think Robson's perhaps a bit more attractive, perhaps a bit more of a high profile. I suppose high profile. I mean, maybe because Naismith's just been around as long as he has. You know, he's been managing now it's come up for a decade between East Fife and Queens and Edinburgh and ourselves.
I think high profile is a good way to describe it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I suppose it's like a guy who won the Scottish Cup with Hearts, played for Everton and Sheffield United for a decade, 30 caps for Scotland. It just feels like if he's not getting the opportunities now, then I'm not sure when it happened. When two moderately sized jobs that are step-ups from Stenhousemuir, big step-ups from Stenhousemuir, or step-ups, if they don't come around, I'm not sure when it's going to happen. I mean, Naismith himself has said he wants to manage at as high a level as possible. He's having a great time at Stenhousemuir, but I mean, Stenhousemuir. I mean, I'd love to be managing Stenhousemuir, but I appreciate it's not the be all and everyone, be all and end all for everyone else. So I can understand that he wants to go elsewhere, but I think that he is. I'm going to assume that he's well off. Money isn't an issue for him. You know, you mentioned there about his time playing for Everton and Sheffield United. So I think he just does it for the love of the game, and he just wants to manage it as high a level as possible. But it's great for us, the level of just that level of camaraderie he's fostered within that team, the group of players that he's signed, the group of players that he continues to sign as well. Not many duds that he's brought in. There's just a really good feeling around the club at the moment, and I think there might come a time where, I don't know, if Airdrie, for instance, want to go in a different direction, if it doesn't work out with Rhys McCabe, Naismith might be someone they want to look to, but for the time being, just very relieved that he's still with us going into 2025.
Well, I'm glad that you're happy at Raith's managerial appointment. What about, speaking about managers, what about Alloa? Because Andy Graham starting to come under a wee bit of pressure, I suppose. I noticed his post-match interview, probably through no fault of his own, was something like 81 seconds, but it does feel like it's getting to that point where they're not saying that much in their post-game stuff every time they lose a game, if that makes sense.
Tell that to Queen of the South. Peter Murphy's post-match interview was, I think it was 8 minutes after that Arran game.
Mistakes.
Aye, so maybe it just depends on who's doing the interview. Maybe sometimes 81 seconds is enough. Maybe just asking variations of the same question. Maybe that's enough. Who knows? It's not for me to say. But I was looking at Andy Graham's record, and it's not great at the moment. 1 win in the last 7, and they've 3 defeats in the last 3 matches there. And I can perhaps appreciate why supporters are a bit disillusioned by him, because if you've had a good season last season where they finished in 3rd place, and who knows, they could have beaten Hamilton Accies. They were giving Hamilton Accies a good game had it not been for Morgan Neal's daft red card. We've spoken about that on previous shows. They could have perhaps won match, and they could have beaten Inverness Caledonian Thistle. I mean, they were in a bad place. But it feels like if you're not repeating what you did last season, then you're going backwards. And that's what it feels a little bit like with Alloa. However, I would say that I want to see, I mean, it's easy for me to say, but I'd really want to see Graham succeed, and I think he deserves a chance to succeed. He's acknowledged that some of the signings that he's made haven't been good enough. And it must be really difficult if you've taken like 3 excellent loan players. You've got I'm not going to call Bobby Wales a generational striker, but someone whose quality is very obvious. Now he's playing and scoring in the Scottish Premiership. Taylor Stephen had a really good season. Now he's playing in the Cliftonville. I think he's in loan out from St Johnstone. And Ethan Sutherland on the fringe of the the St Mirren first team. It's very difficult to try and reprise that. Like, to go out there and speak to other clubs and say, can you give us a really good striker, please? Because you don't know what you're going to get. A player might be highly rated at academy football, go into an environment like that and not necessarily being the best of them. So it is a risk. I mean, I don't want to say that he got lucky with them, but I mean, it wasn't even him that signed them. I think he brought Ethan Sutherland to the club, but I think that Stephen and Wales were Brian Rice's signings.
Brian Rice.
Yeah. So I think that he knows what he needs to do, and I've no doubt that he'll be speaking to players, and he's probably got people lined up already. But they really need some wide players, really need some wide attackers, because Scott Honeyman, for instance, they've got on loan from Falkirk, barely involved in the game at all. Zane Thompson playing at left back, not really involved in the game. Stephen O'Donnell. I've been calling Stephen O'Donnell. It's Cammy O'Donnell and Stephen Buchanan. I got them mixed up. There's probably somebody listening to this early in the podcast screaming, fucking dumpling. But they were inhibited as to what they can do. And up front, I think Rankin's a good player. Rankins has shown this season that he's a really good player. But I think you're expecting a lot for somebody who's just had a really good season at the Lowland League under his belt to try and fire a team who are expected to perhaps challenge for promotion. It needs a bit of help. So those are the areas that they need to address. And it's important to say as well that Stevie Headington and Curtis Roberts were both missing. Roberts has been a big loss. I think Roberts is, anytime I see Roberts, especially for Alloa, he does give the team so much drive, and they just don't have that. Vertanen, the most mobile of players, someone that will just want to sit and break up play and give the ball to someone else, and that's where like Hetherington and Roberts have got a bit of drive about them that can carry the ball forward. Skugel would probably start most weeks, but he's coming back after an injury, so there is a degree of misfortune there. But I do hope Graham is given the patience, because I can understand why they're fed up. I've seen them 3 times this season. I don't think Alloa are pretty good. I don't think they're that good. They're not fun to watch. They don't create much. And that's me seeing them 3 times. So if you're watching that every week, you'd be like, this isn't much fun at the moment.
And I suspect they might kick on. I mean, like Graham was mentioned about the fact that he didn't enjoy the summer transfer window and found it pretty difficult. So I would like to think he's learned a wee bit, and how maybe he can get a wee bit more out of it. Mm-hmm. Whether it's the kind of January transfer window, which feels reasonably important for them right now. But you're right in terms of, I think they have players coming back. So I do think for the second half of the season, they might be better than what we've seen so far. Hopefully, because you're right, I've got a wee soft spot for them. Yeah,
I mean, up next, Arbroath versus Alloa Athletic.
Arbroath will win.
Stenhousemuir versus Annan Athletic.
Stenhousemuir will win that.
Thank you. That's exactly what we wanted to hear. Now, Shaughan, we will drop into League 2. And by all rights, we should be talking about the top of the table clash between Elgin City and Peterhead. But since there are only story of the match style highlights, we're going to the opposite end of the division, and we're talking about Stranraer's 1-1 draw with Clyde. Because as we mentioned there, Stranraer, best highlights package in the business, as we saw here. Jordan Allen put the Bully ahead towards the end of the first half, but Tommy Robson conceded a penalty for tugging back Robbie Foster inside the penalty box. He was red carded, and Mark Russell equalised from the spot. Not the best result for either club, not the worst result either. Both still skirting around lower mid-table. Stranraer are in 8th place with 18 points, and Clyde are just 1 point and 1 place ahead of them. Shaughan, thoughts on Stranraer 1, Clyde 1?
This very much felt like a game that was they kind of pivoted, I suppose, on the red card for Tommy Robson. I thought up until that point, Clyde looked to be aside. The amount of times that Jordan Allen was just played through.
Aye, it just looked really simple as well.
Whether he was just offside or just onside and finishing poorly, Clyde certainly seemed to have the upper hand in the first half. That seemed to change, certainly in the second half. Was it Robbie Foster that came on?
Yeah.
He seemed to cause some chaos.
Chaos is the right word.
And whether he was any good or not, I'm not entirely sure, but certainly he was chaotic. And ultimately it was him kind of moving through for that Robson brought down when he was last man. So then it was a penalty and it was a deserved red card. At that point, you maybe thought that Shaughan would kick on and maybe win the game, but it didn't really look like they created too many chances. It didn't look like the best game between two poor sides.
Yeah, you mentioned Robbie Foster there. I thought when I was watching, I was thinking, oh, he plays football like a bucking bronco at a hen party. Just.
He's certainly up for it.
He's certainly up for it. I mean, he was given Lawrence Nelson wasn't on commentary duty. He was on a holiday to Pennycook. So I hope he had an absolutely phenomenal time there. But his stand-in, Cameron Ritchie, gave Foster the man of the match.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose he provided the goal, I suppose, in terms of he was brought down. He certainly seemed to cause bother in the Clyde backline. Difficult, I suppose, to assess when you only have the 19 minutes of Shaughan highlights. It is a long highlights package, to be fair. But he did seem to cause some chaos.
He did. And you mentioned as well, just going right back to the start of your point, Jordan Allen, some of his finishing, there's a great bit. I think it's Robbie Leach that plays him on. And you can see in the highlights as he's through and goal, both Robbie Leach and Martin Rennie standing with their hands up, expecting him to score and just getting ready to run away to celebrate him. And he balloons it over the bar. I just see the hands on the back of the head. It's so funny. The pair of them just doing it in tandem with the hands in the air.
And it's a mile over. Like that first, that is so far over.
It's a really, really bad finish. It's a really bad finish.
Do you know what I didn't like? In the second half when somebody from Clyde throws on a second ball on the back, and then the camera kind of pans to him, and he's just like
he's giving the finger.
He's just giving a finger. It's like, oh, you really look like a bad egg. Maybe he isn't. Maybe normally isn't. Maybe he's just a kind of 90-minute bad egg on a Saturday. But he came across as a bad egg.
Speaking of 90-minute bad eggs, at the end of the game, Big Ebbo the kit man is up there clapping the away fans. Now, I think it's very, very rare that a kit man gets involved with applauding the travelling support. And I thought to myself, the last time I saw him on the Stair Park turf, he was being sort of like coddled away, flicking the V's at the fans in the stand.
He was probably encouraged by that guy throwing the second ball on. He just loved it. Absolutely loved it.
You're right in terms of what you say about the game. I think Clyde did have some really good chances. Most of them coming from Jordan Allen, but it did seem really straightforward for them. Just simple, like good movement. The one where Leach set him up is actually a really good flick to. So somebody wins a. Am I right in saying somebody wins a header and then first time flick? It seemed to be the tactic was as soon as that ball's in the middle of the park, or as soon as that ball moves into the final third, Alan, want you to step up and put through. Am I right in saying I watched Darren Young's post-match interview? Did he refer to Jordan Allen as I got down here, Nacho? Did you notice that?
I think he did, but I couldn't work out why. I just thought it was a nickname that I was unaware of.
Aye.
You've never heard of it either?
I've never heard of it. I mean, I thought like Geordie or something like that would be his nickname, but Nacho, I don't know. But that certainly seemed to be a tactic, and it seemed to work. Just a combination of, like you say, like bad finishing or just kind of trickling offside. But he takes his goal very well, and it is just a really simple ball. I think that you could hear Brian Martin in commentary complaining about the inability. I mean, it's one thing if you lose your first ball. If you're losing the second balls as well, then you're going to really struggle, and that's exactly what happened. Is that but long ball goes up front, Sonora can't clear it properly, and it just looked over for Allen to run onto, and it's a good finish, so it just opens up his, I think his side foot, doesn't matter, but he lifts it over Pazikas and into the net.
And I suppose it was interesting going into the game because a lot of Shaughan fans were concerned about the fact that Robbie Much had been recalled by Ayr for like a week emergency. What the emergency loan?
It's original, right? However, in his post-match interview, Stevie Aitken, who the assistant manager, said that he's probably not going to come back.
Yeah, but I think that was because his loan might have been up at the start of January, maybe, so maybe January 1st. So I think that's why I suppose he's not going to come back. But I suppose that does feel like a position that they need to strengthen. Because in fairness, Pazikas didn't seem to do much wrong in this game, but in general, there's been a few times where it feels like he's been lacking a wee bit.
We've spoken about him, but you've gone from Lewis Budanaukis, who had been pretty good for them last season. I think you've gone back. Pazikis is from Rangers as well. Am I right in saying he's a goalkeeper from Rangers? It's like going back to Rangers and say, well, we don't have a Budanaukis, but we've got a Pazikis here. You can have, and it's not as good. And Robbie Much did feel like an upgrade, and I think that kept clean sheets for them, which is unusual for Stranraer. But there was that's the challenge, and it's just interesting to listen to pretty much both managers talking about the upcoming transfer window, that we need players. And Darren Young says, yeah, but every club in the country is pretty much in the same boat, needing players. So it'll be interesting to see what the business that they're able to do. There was one other bit I wanted to point out, a really, really good tackle from Craig Ross. I think the ball's flicked in to Barry Cudahy. And no, it's not Barry Cudahy. I think it's to Leach, actually. And Craig Ross just flings himself in front of it, because he basically takes a touch. He's got going to place his shot from 6 yards out, and Craig Ross just throws himself in front of the ball like one of those tech bros trying to defend Elon Musk on X brackets, formerly Twitter.
That was a very good challenge for a player.
But then, as you mentioned, the game changes on the red card, and it's he brought on Robbie Foster at half time, as you mentioned. He has definitely got something about him, because he's very direct, he's very fast, he looks quite a powerful runner as well. I think he's quite a difficult player to try and mark. But basically it's like Darren Lang, Darren Lang's unveil, was Ryan Edgar flicks the ball onto him, takes out the Clyde defence, he's in goal. First shot's terrible, straight at Robbie Hemfrey, but it's a fortunate bounce, comes back out to him, and he's trying to pull the trigger. Tommy Robson's grabbing onto him and pulls him down, prevents him from getting a shot on target. Obvious red card, and then Mark Russell steps up, dumps Hemfrey on his backside, and the ball gets passed into the net.
Based on what I've seen from Robbie Foster before and after, I do wonder if Tommy Robson had just left him alone, he might have missed. There would have been no penalty, no red card.
There was a bit in the game where he had a great opportunity. He had the ball out wide, and he had Elliot Dunlop, I think, was actually standing with his hands. He's about the penalty spot. Pass it to him, and he can shoot a goal, but he goes himself from a daft angle, and it's easy enough for Hemfrey to try and block. That'd been really frustrating to watch, and I don't know if he was getting a bit carried away about the role that he played in getting the equaliser, playing part of the equaliser, but. Just after that as well, that bit as well, I've got my notes here, he punched the turf. He was down on his knees, actually, like punching the turf.
I don't know if it was, I don't know if he watches the Stranraer highlights, but he was blamed very much so for the last time that Stranraer conceded by David Martin for that last minute goal against...
Still in Albion.
Yes, he was very much blamed for that, and probably rightly so. So maybe he's trying to make up for that, I don't know.
Speaking of Brian Martin, there's a really funny bit where you get a corner kick. He's not going short, surely. Oh dear, my pet hate. And Matty Grant chucks it in, and it's almost...
Nearly goes in!
He catches him out, and he almost...
Hates short corners. Absolutely hates short corners.
That's, again, you really have to credit the Stranraer highlights. Like George Frank does an excellent job of putting them together. I mean, even from the wee sleigh bells at the start and the wee bit of snow, don't think that didn't go unnoticed.
I noticed that. I was like, oh, it's Christmas.
Brilliant. But the effort they go into it is the fact that, a fairly rudimentary 1-1 draw between two poor sides, you can have a lot of fun talking about them. And I've always thought that about like Lawrence Nelson and Brian Martin. And I think Cammy Ritchie's a good standing, but he's too straight for this. He's too straight. We need Lawrence back. But it's always what's so good about them is they always feel like they're straddling the line between like being really good and being indulgent, but they never fall. They never fall into... there was a clip from when they played Stranraer, and there was a fox on the pitch, and they started talking about a teacher at Stranraer Academy whose surname was Fox.
Aye, very good. And you're right. The guy that stood in, Cameron, I thought he was good. But he's no Lawrence Nelson. Maybe in time he'll get there. But at this moment in time, he is no Lawrence Nelson.
But that's Stranraer. They've 4 games unbeaten, albeit 3 consecutive draws, and they should have definitely beaten Stirling Albion. They could have been several goals up before Josh Kerr got that 96-minute equaliser. But it's a difficult time for them because not only is Robbie Much returned to United and might not return to Stair Park, Elliot Dunlop's away to Airdrieonians. Now, whether or not he is the man that's going to turn around Airdrieonians' season, I don't know. But it seems as though he was coming into a bit of a game for Stranraer.
I mean, I think he'll be a bigger loss to Stranraer than he will be a gain to Airdrie. I'm concerned about Stranraer. I know I've said this a few times now. If Forfar are going to catch up on anybody, it feels like there's a few teams kind of putting results together at the bottom of the table. If Russell McLean continues to score hat-tricks every week for Forfar, they'll be absolutely fine. I do wonder if Stranraer will be the team that they catch up with. Yeah,
and what about Clyde though? Clyde, I think that was a really good result in the circumstance, although they did ultimately shoot themselves in the foot with Robson's red card to dig out a draw in the conditions, especially when you've only got a squad of 14 to pick from with the only 3 players on the bench.
I suppose the thing about... I'm not entirely sure that they have impressed as much as I thought they would under Darren Young. And I see in terms of January and going forward, it feels like he is very much going to have to... Like, I know they have a Kickstarter. I know they've raised whatever.
They've raised their target, £55,000, so well done to everyone that donated.
And fair play to them. But I do think that's probably to keep the lights on. It's certainly not going to be to augment the squad. So if Darren Young wants to bring players in, he's probably going to have to move players out.
Yeah. It feels like quite a bloated squad. It felt like that even at the beginning of the season. I think we said that when we talked about the forward options. It felt like he got too many players to select from there.
And if he's going to move players out, he's going to have to move players in that are ultimately on probably far lower wages than his current players are on, that he's going to have to move out, if that makes sense. So whether they'll be up to scratch, I don't know. I think that Darren Young faces a very, very difficult January transfer window. But I don't put it against them turning things around there.
No. You're right in terms of saying a difficult window, because that will be predicated on getting players out the door.
Yeah.
And it was one thing this time last year when you're moving on like the likes of like Ross Forbes or what was the boy's name, like Dykes. I can't some dumpling they signed from the University of Glasgow. Easy enough to just move on them because they'll probably be on like really small contracts. But one of the reasons that Clyde are in this state is because a lot of these players have been given above market value contracts, and either players are going to have to take a pay cut, you have to send them out on loan with the parent club taking their wage or whatever. There's going to be some sort of negotiations that are going to have to take place, and that's going to be difficult for them to do. It felt like just this last 12 months, pretty much since Ian McCall came in, the amount of money that's been chucked in that team, and they just haven't had value. You said that pretty much since the start of the season, just haven't had value for money, and that's a challenge. But Young, he's a League Two specialist. Talked to bring his own players. Wouldn't surprise me if Ross Davidson pitches up at Clyde at some point. He's basically been everywhere else Darren Young's been. So who knows?
Yeah, I think they'll be okay. I think generally there's been not a marked improvement since he came in, but certainly a general improvement. So I think they'll be okay, but maybe only just. Yeah,
so I think that's a big win for the Spartans, beating Edinburgh City 1-0. I think that nudges them away from any immediate danger. I think that was a win they absolutely needed as well. But yeah, aye. Listen, we'll still be here. We'll be here to talk about Forfar Athletic pulling themselves off the table. We'll be to talk about Russell McLean's next hat-trick. You can book it. We'll be here to talk about what Raith Rovers and Stenhousemuir get up to next. And you'll be here to listen. Great, yes. Great, I can't wait either. But Shaughan, we are going to record a bonus podcast, basically touching on some of the discussion points that we've spoken here. We're going to look at 3 clubs each from the lower leagues and perhaps look at areas they need to address in the transfer window that's coming up. Even though the transfer window doesn't really count in the lower leagues, you can still take loans and freebies on well past the January deadline. But we're going to do that. That's going to be for the Patreon. If you want to get involved, patreon.com/terrace podcast. I think that's what Fowler says at the end of them.
I mean, surely if you Google that, you'll get something along those lines.
Unless there's one Terrace Pod, which is somebody just creaming money, creaming £2 a month off people, and they're like, "Where's my podcast? I'm paying all this money. I'm not getting anything in return." So make sure you do that, and any money that you donate to us is greatly appreciated. We're very thankful for it, and it allows us to keep on churning out content such as this and the podcast we are about to do. But I think this is the last podcast. This will be the last Terrace podcast of 2024.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's very exciting to me. Probably not so much exciting to you, the listener, but it's good to be the last ones out the door.
Class.
Yeah, so we will go. There's plenty of football taking place. There's a full Premiership card on the Thursday, and it's just back to normal business on the Saturday. So please, if you are going to a game, enjoy your football. But unlike Jade Goody, Jack Tweed, Jackie Budden, Joe O'Meara, and Danielle Lloyd, enjoy your football. Please do so respectfully. Thank you very much.